So, oh, awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. So welcome all. This is our Spark OE Week webcast, breaking down silos in open education, strategies for collaboration. I'm going to be your moderator today. My name is Trudy Radke, and I am an open education project manager here at Spark. And I'm really excited to dig into this. So before we get started, I did just want to take a second to acknowledge two things. So the first thing is that it's Open Education Week, which I know we're all super excited for, which is March 7th through 11th this year. The second thing I wanted to acknowledge is that, there's a lot of challenging context going on in the world right now. There's a lot of people that are experiencing upheaval. There's just a lot going on in the world right now, and it would feel inappropriate not to acknowledge that before we dig into this. But I'm still really happy and grateful to be here. I'm excited that I get to work with educators across the states and also internationally. And I'm excited that even in challenging contexts, we can kind of work together to remove barriers to knowledge and increase equity and civic mindedness within our spheres of influence. So it's a marathon, not a sprint. So even though there's a lot going on right now, when you like the people you're running with, it really helps. So I'm excited to move forward. All right, last thing I wanted to do before I turn over to our speakers is just wanted to give you guys a little bit of context for the title of this presentation or panel, excuse me. So when I was brainstorming ideas for OE Week, I had just finished this incredible book called The Silo Effect, The Peril of Expertise and the Promise of Breaking Down Barriers. It is by an incredible woman named Gillian Tett, who is a social anthropologist and financial journalist. And if that combination sounds interesting to you, then you will definitely love this book. Basically, she has a PhD in social anthropology, and she decided to apply her academic background to financial institutions and kind of dig around in there and figure out how they work, kind of pick their brains, and then see why we have the institutions that we have today. And she largely covers the 08 financial crisis in this book, but through a social anthropology lens, which is really intriguing. So this is a quick quote from the book here. And I think it really sums up kind of the premise of her book. And I just want to draw your attention to this last bit, which is the first step to mastering our silos is the most basic one of all, to think how we unthinkingly classify the world around each day, and then try to imagine an alternative. And something that she talks a lot about in the book is that, there's nefarious actors out there, and that's sometimes why things go wrong, but often there's really intelligent, really educated, well-meaning people that can sometimes be accidentally trapped in their cultural, academic, or social silos. And we often inherit these kinds of modes of operation. We don't necessarily create them. So thinking about them and trying to think around them is sometimes a great way to make sure that the information we disseminate actually gets to the right people, and that we have a collaborative mindset in an OER context, an open education context. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speakers here. And I have a picture of their actual titles. These are extremely knowledgeable people, and I want to make sure I get their titles correct. So we're joined by Dr. Robert Awkward, who is the Assistant Commissioner for Academic Effectiveness for the Massachusetts Department of Higher Education. Jennifer Parks, the Vice President of the Midwestern Higher Education Compact. And Dr. Lisa Young, who's a Faculty Director for the Center for Teaching and Learning at Scottsdale Community College in Arizona, which is a part of the Maricopa Community College District. So enough of me, I'm gonna get out of here. I'm gonna stop this share. And if our panelists are ready, I'm gonna dig into the first question. Good to go? Awesome, okay. So our first question is, what has been your experience with OER silos, or have you experienced an OER silo in your line of work, or an example of one?
Are you calling on someone, or should we just speak? Okay, well, since I'm speaking, I'll just go ahead and start speaking. Hello, everybody. Good to see you all. Thank you all for spending time with us. You know how valuable everybody's time is, because we're all running in hyperspeed these days. So the fact that you took the time to give yourself some professional development and to expand your knowledge and awareness is most appreciated by all of us who are doing this. The idea of a silo is an interesting concept, because obviously when you think of silos, you think of something that's up and down, right? Vertical. But I really thought about this question, and I thought, I think of silos in two ways. There are vertical silos, like faculty, for example, who do not know to work with librarians and instructional designers to help them. So they're in their silos, the librarians, the instructional designers, the faculty, and they don't necessarily connect with each other. Faculty and students, for example, faculty don't think of being able to use open pedagogy as a way of working with their students. So the students are in their silo, the faculty are in a silo. We're busy doing Sage on the stage, and we're just feeding them. And they missed the opportunity to connect and do co-sharing and co-learning of knowledge, co-creation. And then I was thinking about horizontal silos, like, for example, between faculty and administration, because administration obviously has the resources. They're not always knowing and aware of what the faculty are doing or necessarily supporting what the faculty wish to do. So sometimes you have issues, that's not a traditional silo, but it's certainly obstacles to people working cross lines to get things done. So those are some of my thoughts about that.
So working at a regional level, I talk to folks in institutions, at the state, at systems, and sometimes nationally. And so I made a list, and I could have kept going. But obviously, some of the silos I've observed, some of the barriers or these boundaries, these kind of artificial boundaries that people put around the way they think about their practice, definitely involved faculty and librarians, faculty and instructional designers, faculty and administration, faculty and students. So all of those pieces within a university or within a system, even where people don't necessarily think of themselves just as maybe by the outcome, which is service to students. Maybe they think about it in some other main defining term. So that's an important one on campuses. And like I said, at a system level. There are also other things that I've noticed in our work. We do a lot with the technology surrounding OER. So there are these different platforms. And a lot of times they don't speak to each other. And that might sound really too detailed, too in the weeds, but indeed it does make a problem for sharing things, finding things, and making sure everyone has as much open and transferable access and interoperable access as possible. I also, because I work with 12 different states, they're siloed. I mean, they want to be open, they want to learn from each other, but still within those state communities, you have a bit of siloing. The boundaries between them are porous, but some are less and some are more porous. There's this boundary between K-12 and higher ed, because I do work with those folks too. And again, some places it's a thicker wall or higher wall than at other places, but that's an important one where I think we can do a lot more work to make this more continuous experience for students as they learn at an early age to use and access OER and to engage in open pedagogy. That expectation will follow them on their educational path. Then as I work with institutions, sometimes you'll have state universities, the community college system, and you'll have private universities. And we don't want there to be silos, but yet there are. And so they'll have a repository here, they'll have a repository here, and they'll have a repository here. Oh, and they're in 3 different platforms. And they've duplicated a lot of the work and things. So that's, again, one of the consequences that we will be talking about too. That's another type of silo I see. And then just, again, there are public libraries that are doing tremendous amounts of good work with OER and want to do more. But so much of it is located in education, and it's not necessarily located in public libraries, which have their own way of serving the communities and serving the purpose of education that goes on outside of a university or college or a classroom setting. So those are just some of the ones that I've experienced as well, but there are many more.
And Jenny and Bob shared some amazing ways that we have these silos that we potentially need to break down. And happy Open Education Week, everybody, by the way. But I want to kind of take it in a different approach in terms of, these lost opportunities with these silos in regard to, Jenny mentioned, within a state, the state institutions, the community colleges. In Arizona specifically, we have articulation among our public universities and all of our community colleges. So essentially, we're teaching the same courses, and we have this lost opportunity where we're so siloed, we don't have the ability to get together and develop content together. And I was in a meeting this morning, and I'm always saying we have to break the box. We can't live in this box, and we have. As Trudy mentioned, there's so much hardship in the world and there's so many challenges, but there's also so much opportunity. And as we go through these hardships, we have such an opportunity to make real meaningful change. And I was in a meeting about OER today, and one other silo is discipline specific versus interdisciplinary. We have this opportunity to change education, to solve problems, but we can't do that within our individual disciplines. We have to be interdisciplinary to do that. So more and more, as I wake up every day and live in this world in the last 2 years, I'm really seeing that while we have institutional silos, in my perspective, one of our biggest challenges is educating the world in an interdisciplinary way and breaking down those silos so that we can really collaborate and help prepare our humanity to be able to move forward in great ways.
Fabulous. So we're just one question in, and you can already see why we picked these three speakers, I think. So I'm actually going to flip the script a little bit. So you guys are so nice to even come on here, and now I'm going to go out of order with the questions. So I hope you're not too upset with me. But I think I want to skip the second question I had and maybe go straight to the third one, and then maybe talk about kind of dissemination a little bit more specifically after that. Because the way you guys were framing it kind of got me in this headspace. So the third question, in your experience, what is the best way to foster OER buy-in, collaboration, and dissemination? So there are three things going on there. So you've explained kind of the difficulties and those barriers that exist. In your experience, how have you guys been able to encourage that across those lines?
I can start with this one. I think that buy-in is really critical. And what I tend to do and what we do, we tend to bring it back to our students. We're a student-centered organization. And the reason that we all get up every morning and go to our wonderful careers is for our students, so we can help them achieve their dreams. And in that respect, when sometimes it's challenging to promote OER to faculty. It's change. It's a lot of work. And it's sometimes, it takes time to develop fabulous and adopt and adapt fabulous materials so that they're right for your students. But when we talk about this from a student-centered approach, we're able to share that you're able to customize the materials for your students. You can get your students involved and engaged in the content development process through open pedagogy. When we did focus groups years ago, we found that students were mining our schedules to try to find classes that were OER. And so we could save our students time where they could spend time with their families or work or study. And so in terms of dissemination or buy-in of our faculty, it's really, for me, it's about bringing it back to our students, because that's why we do this.
I can go next. So again, I work at a regional level and therefore see a wide range of OER implementation and contemplation. And so one of the things that's really important for us is to create communities. So even though there are kind of silos and barriers around them. One of the nice things about having a little bit of a barrier around it is there's this sense of community. You're somehow different from everyone else in just that maybe you're the community in Illinois or you're the community in Ohio that really does this. So that's the flip side of that. But by creating communities, you also create support, excitement, buy-in, a place to go lick your wounds when you have some people who are naysayers and are really negative. So we've worked really hard. That is really the undergirding of the work we've done at NAC. And we do that through something else that we find in a lot of our work is just providing them with a space to talk. So for example, sorry, this is Ziggy who is helping today. We orchestrate the time and the space. We schedule the meetings, we do the agendas. They say, well, next time we'd really like to hear what they're doing in Minnesota, or can you find someone who knows a lot about repositories? And we just do the legwork because they're all so busy and they can't do it themselves. Just giving them that really, I mean, I hate to use the word low, but it's low hanging fruit. Just getting out there and giving people that little extra piece they need to move forward or move a little bit forward in their efforts. Another thing is helping them with events. So we've been helping sponsor OER state virtual summits and things. Again, anytime you're kind of pulling it together, creating a sense of community, but also sharing, there's momentum, right? Oh, well, they're doing it. Maybe I could do it too. Or you go across state lines like, well, if they're doing it, we can do it too. So there are these different motivators for folks. There's also, you need to talk to administrators. Those are the things, it's great that we work. It's very grassroots. And I think the movement has always been that and needs to continue that. But there does come a point where people who have the ability to reassign, who have the ability to say, I do think we should add this to promotion and tenure. Let's try to do that. Or I do think we can add OER to your title. The people who have the ability to do that need to know more. And I find that if I can educate administrators, it escalates the rate at which OER can unfold on a campus. Something else is if we can provide them with good research. Yes, OER, it looks like the outcomes are as good or better. And here's yet again, some cost savings research, some student outcomes research. That's another thing. And then the final thing that I think we're beginning to see a lot work really well in the Midwest is we have a couple of states where once a month, and where I've seen this really, really powerful is in the Minnesota, Minnesota does it too, but the Michigan community colleges. Once a month, they have sharing that is distinctive to their discipline areas. So let's say it's going to be physics. And so you can come, whether you teach physics or not, there are going to be people there who teach physics throughout the system. And there are going to be some people there who teach with OER and physics. And so they just do a show and tell. And then the others are like, well, but how do you do this? Really? You do it that way? That is really helping. It's faculty telling other faculty what works. And by making it, I agree, Lisa, that it needs to be broader, but since we still are predominantly divided into our content areas, it really helps for them to see not just, that OER is great, but here's a specific resource and a set of methods that have been successful in teaching physics, Spanish, whatever it is. So those are some of the things that I have found to be successful.
Okay, let me jump in, following Lisa and Jenny on this. I should make it clear because Jenny's made it clear she's talking from a regional level and Lisa's talking from an institutional level and I'm talking from a system level. So we actually all bring kind of different perspectives to this, and that kind of, you'll hear that in what we're sharing. On the first question, I forgot actually another one of those big silos, and actually I want to give kudos to Lisa Young, who's from my state in Massachusetts, who made a note in here about departments to departments. We kind of talk about disciplines, but that reflects in the departments, and departments sit next to each other and don't work across line and share with each other. In terms of fostering buy-in, collaboration, dissemination, from a statewide perspective, my role is really kind of leading this effort across multiple institutions. We have 29 public institutions in Massachusetts with whom I work. So we use several mechanisms to try to foster this buy-in, collaboration, dissemination. One, of course, requires frequent communication with both the Board of Higher Education, in terms of policy perspectives and with institutional leadership. So that's an important piece of this, keeping it on the radar, if you will, for them. To help me do that, we have a statewide advisory council. And by that, I mean, we have one representative from each of those 29 institutions. So part of their role is to both help shape statewide policy, but then also to take back information back to their campuses and work on their campuses upwards and across their campuses. So that's a very important tool to help with this dissemination and buy-in and collaboration across all of our institutions, because obviously by us meeting, we meet regularly from September through June monthly. That means there's lots of opportunities for us to talk and share and learn and collaborate across lines. We have a statewide student advisory council that's not connected to our OER activity, but they're integrated. They are a standalone group, but again, those are made up of the presidents of the student governments from each of the campuses, and OER is a major objective for them. So four members of the student advisory council sit on our advisory council, so they're integrated in our work, and then we work closely with them to help, because you know, at the end of the day, nothing is better than having a student talk about why OER is important to any audience. I mean, people are always moved when they hear from students. I want to give a shout out to Karen Pakula in Minnesota, because she's done some great work around faculty learning circles. And that's another way to create, especially interdisciplinary buy-in, by getting folks to talk across lines and share and learn from each other. And again, it all keeps this on the radar. And then just in general, all of this is about trying to create and encourage more cross-institutional conversation. So for example, one of the things we talked with at our campuses is about creating an Oer committee on their campus. So the leader from the campus, pulls together a committee of folks with faculty and IR, maybe IR, but faculty and instructional designers and librarians and teaching and learning folks, as a way about not only to shape and guide their OER strategy and plans on the campus, but to get that conversation going across the campuses to different people and keeping the conversation high in the radar.
And I just wanted to jump in. Now the trash truck is going by, which is always so opportune. But I was thinking about it from the institutional level, but I am working, Maricopa is working on a multi-institutional grant with Arizona State University, Ivy Tech, and Miami-Dade. And what's really great about the collaboration and dissemination of the OER that we're curating is that we were able to really structure a process for the institutions to come together to do an analysis of the competencies for the courses that we were really focusing on, and then really bringing those faculty together and supporting them so that we could curate materials, develop necessary materials in alignment with those competencies. We developed a wealth of assessments and actually 4 open tools that really look at essential workforce skills. And so with that, I think it's getting the people together, making sure that you have alignment. And that took months and months to just try to decide what to focus on in terms of that collaboration, and then pulling the people and the players together from the multiple institutions. And it's really successful. And then in terms of dissemination is always hard because we have so many repositories. So it's really less about where you put it and how you promote it. And I think that there are so many ways that we're doing that at the grassroots level through at the community college level, the Community College Consortium for OER. There's cross-listing within different repositories. There are so many listservs, but I think that that's an opportunity that we as an open community have to explore in the future. And I will put some information on that grant in the chat in case anybody's interested in that.
Trudy, can I jump in again?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
I see another Massachusetts colleague, Millie Gonzalez, put a great question in here talking about silos, which I want to respond to. Her question was, how do you bring down equity silos that inhibit faculty of color from adopting, adapting, creating OER, and how do you embed systematically and structurally equitable, systematic and structural equity in OER to ensure diverse perspectives are included? That's a tough one, and the reason it's tough, like most things in most things, it comes down at the end to money. For example, how are we doing that in Massachusetts? We had not been doing that in Massachusetts in a specific way until we were thankful able to receive a Department of Education federal grant, and using the money from that grant, the Open Textbook Pilot Program, we did a proposal that said we specifically want to focus on both creating OER in areas where there's a lack of OER and culturally relevant OER adaptation and creation, and that we would absolutely specifically target to get more faculty of color to participate in that process. So of course, the answer is, what's the answer to breaking equity? You need money to start, because in order to do that, which unfortunately we have, my state legislature has not yet funded OER to that regard. With that money, we're able to in fact go out, and each year we're targeting to do 24 adaptations and creation projects of faculty across the 6 institutions that are part of this consortium, which is called ROTEL. I think Millie just put the link in the chat. And that's really going to help us to be able to do that. And for all the faculty in the chat, we have brought a training package in there that specifically talks about how you bring that lens to this work. So we don't want you just recreating the same old psychology books that only looks at studies on white men in the United States. Right? This is an opportunity to broaden the voice, get more voices who are not being heard, engage into the material, so students are seeing a diverse, rich, robust materials being created out of that. So, and everybody can't go get a DOE grant, but some of your states are, putting some serious funding on the table. So to the extent they are, you should absolutely look at using that money to get more money, because the adaptation and creation work is very time intensive. So you really need to put some serious incentive to get faculty to do that work, and then provide the training around it to make sure they get focused and do culturally relevant, accessible, open teaching and learning materials. So I hope that responds to your comment, Millie.
This is why I really have a soft spot for panels, because we just get experts in the room and better questions are asked than I ever could have come up with. And I love the directions that these always go in. It's super helpful. So I want to backtrack. I actually think this is a perfect segue. I want to backtrack to the second question we had all discussed, which was, what is difficult about OER dissemination, and how can we make sure that content and info makes it to the right audience? But providing a little bit of context to that question, I wrote that question from my personal experience where dissemination is the issue. But Lisa, you made a really great point where you're saying it's not where you put it, it's how you promote it. And then it's also making me think about this question that was asked in the chat, which is, is dissemination the biggest barrier to OER adoption, or is it collaboration, or is it buy-in? So first, I guess, what are your thoughts on dissemination, or have I misinterpreted that? And is maybe collaboration and buy-in, are those things that need to be targeted more heavily than dissemination? And let me know if that made sense. I'm really making you guys think on your toes today. So I appreciate you all.
Well, again, having kind of a wide range of stakeholders in regular conversations about these things, I think it depends on the stakeholder, what the key issue is. I would say with a lot of folks at the highest levels of maybe institutional leadership, it's still understanding and buy-in. There are still a lot of folks who are not really clear. They especially will confuse it with open access and some of the other options that are out there. And so it's awareness, it's understanding for that group. For those who kind of get it, then it is, of course, buy-in. And there's still a lot of faculty, unfortunately, who are in that buy-in phase. They're just not sure. And it's for a number of reasons, right? It might just be, I just don't have the time. So then what it is reminding them, well, you don't have to rewrite the whole book. You don't, there's a lot out there, and you can do a piece of it each semester. You can adapt or just use something else. It's somehow legitimizing adaptation and pieces of the work, rather than, because I think that's what I see a lot of. I just don't have time to write a whole book and blah blah blah. Well, you don't have to. You've got these steps, these layers of engagement with the work that you can do. So, and then I still hear, especially in the CTE fields, still hard to find things in my field, or it needs to be really adapted to our state licenses and practices and rules. So I don't know that there is one writ large problem. I think we're now to the point where people are in enough different places and phases of this work that, that it is a different problem for different groups.
I would also, I agree with you 100%, Jenny, about adaptation. I think that really making faculty aware of adaptation is really critically important. I remember I was at an open ed conference years ago in Washington, D.C., and someone said, you know, there's like 1,000 videos out there, but none is perfect. None is the right one for me. And so I think that for some reason, it's okay for us to take a textbook and use half of it and have to supplement it, but it's not okay to take an OER book that we can adapt and use it. And so,
right.
You know, like it's having this conversation with the faculty that you can revise it, you can remix it, but it's having that conversation with every single faculty member is what it really comes down to. And when we did our very first grants for OER back in 2014, trash truck again, we funded English 101 and English 102, our two first-year composition classes. And we funded collaborative teams. And so we were like, we're going to get one fantastic English 101 class, and we're going to get one fantastic English 102 class. And we funded 2 teams, but we ended up with 4 English 101 classes and 4 English 102 classes that were OER. And we were like, we didn't expect this because of the instructional philosophies. So over time, over the last 8 years, what we realized was, you know, we need to make, as we're funding things, work collaboratively on the skeleton of the OER materials, that then the faculty, and really promoting adaptation so the faculty can adapt them for their instructional philosophies and the way they want to teach their classes. But, you know, it's a learning curve.
Mm-hmm. Well said, Lisa. Well said. And we really couldn't hear the truck, by the way. I mean, the list. First, Trudy, you asked actually a 2-part question. One, which was the tougher one, and I agree with Jenny that the buy-in one is still an issue. Then I'd say dissemination, and then collaboration. Because if you get past the first 2, then the last one will kind of take care of itself. And the reasons are the reasons that we all know. I mean, competing priorities. I mean, we got initiative du jour going on everywhere at the institutional level, the system level, the regional level, and everybody's trying to respond to all of that. The faculty, of course, are exhausted from this last 2 years of COVID. So that's a huge issue in terms around the buy-in and dissemination. There are barriers for faculty. We did a survey 2.5 years ago across our system, and what we heard is the most prevalent barriers for faculty were too hard to find materials, not enough high quality, relevant resources, lack of ancillaries, and too hard to edit or change. That represented 85% of the response with those 4 categories there. So those are ongoing barriers that we still have to work to overcome to get their buy-in. In fact, we just did a webinar ourselves for Open Ed Week yesterday on that very topic in Massachusetts, try to help get faculty members to to say, here are some strategies and tactics you can take to overcome those barriers. There's always that ongoing concern among faculty about OER sub-optimizing traditional material courses, i.e., if Lisa does OER and we teach in the same topic, people won't sign up for my course. They're going to sign up for Lisa's course. So that's a problem. Of course, my reaction is, well, that means you need to explore OER for your course. That's what that means. So, but
that is a huge issue, Bob.
Huge
in
issue.
Some places, especially, I'll just say that in the Midwest, not to interrupt you, we have some places where faculty unions actually have held up the progress of OER because they see this as an academic freedom issue. And I mean, I theoretically see what they're saying, but I also, just as you were saying, Lisa, and there's this traditional model and thought about faculty. This is my fiefdom in this classroom, and no one can teach this as well as I can, and no one can write the content or engage in the andragogy pedagogy the way I can. And that's part of the change. I mean, we've got to get past that, which is maybe we have the same learning outcomes for all sections of this course. Maybe they're shared across not just the state, but maybe some regionally in the nation. Maybe there are just some things you should learn in Sociology 101 that are independent of me and what I would say about it. And then how do we do that in a way that creates more of this collaboration? And if I'm going to do that, I need maybe my administration or someone to say, yeah, well, they're aligning with outcomes. Their stuff aligns. And so, yeah, it might be your choice to do something else, and that might be an academic freedom issue, but there's this greater good, this other thing that doing this serves. Sorry, that's my pet peeve.
Oh, God, no.
What's going to serve the students?
Well, that's why I brought that up, because absolutely. And as I said, in fact, the reality is if there's multiple sections of the course, the OER courses may fill first, but students, if they need to take the course, they're going to take the courses. But if you want to get your course filled first, then you probably should get on board and do it. As someone wrote in the chat, that's called an incentive. Amen. The other thing I would want to throw out there about adds to the difficulty is this dark cloud that's following around our institutions and systems, which is inclusive access. That's another barrier. That's another thing. It's getting in the mix, and it's getting people confused, because you have particularly administration, because they don't talk to each other because of those silos, who don't understand that inclusive access or automatic text billing is not OER. So, the publishers come and make the pitch, hey, students get it on day one, and we'll save the money, and we'll give you some kickback to your institution. And they think, whoa, this is win-win-win. Let's do this. And then they sign the contract, and then they happen to mention to somebody who is actually informed about this, oh, by the way, you know what we're doing? Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Because they don't know. They don't understand. They don't know, which is part of the issue about the dissemination part, because you still keep fighting with that to say, you CFO or president or chancellor shouldn't be talking to folks about OER and making contracts without talking to somebody either in your institution or the DHE to say, hey, these folks are talking to me about this. Is this a good thing to do? Should we be exploring this? Oh, well, we just keep on going at it, but that complicates things, because there are people who, both the administration and then the faculty who see that and say, well, it serves the same purpose, doesn't it? And it's like, well, yeah, it does lower costs, but there's a lot of limitations to that. And you can do better. You could do the same thing better at no cost. One of my pet peeves.
I might also throw out that COVID has caused a silo that, we would have been able to disseminate much better if we were together, but silos have been created because we don't know how to access some of the faculty and OER users, even within an organization. And because we don't have those meetings, we don't have access to those distribution lists or what have you. And that is a really big barrier there.
I would add to that, Lisa, is OER doesn't live in a consistent place on most campuses too. So this is going back a few years ago, but when I first started trying to pull together state teams in MEC, we had our first big regional meeting in November of 2018. But I started in the spring trying to figure out, well, who do I invite to this thing? And there was no place to go and find out who's doing OER in Michigan. You kind of sort of knew, but literally it was just months of cold calling. Hey, Iowa, who does OER? I mean, there was just no way to really figure it out. And were you going to call each institution? Well, I did, but you don't know who to call. And it's very common that you're getting someone you think probably knows, but they don't. We still don't know. There are huge amounts of OER going on in institutions where there are plenty of people in that institution have no idea. So yeah, there's still, and again, that's the downside of a grassroots movement, right? Is that kind of systematic awareness and that ability to marshal some change in a more intentional way.
Fabulous. And Bob, thank you so much for bringing up inclusive access. I think that is such a relevant and salient topic right now. And I think that the direction of this has been so great because it bleeds perfectly into the next question here, which is, you know, we know that there's some confusion. We've talked about like kind of these barriers to understanding, like from administrators often, even very well-intentioned, right? They just don't know. So what is a good way to campaign for OER across a campus, across a state network, or even nationally?
Okay, I'll jump in on this one. We seem to be naturally rotating this. It's working out kind of nicely. Well, what are some of the things? I'll tell you some of the things we've been doing in Massachusetts. One, of course, is doing what we're doing right now, tying into these national weeks, whether it's Open Ed Week or Open Awareness Week, which is in October, and then doing programming within the state attached around that. So we kind of try to use those as opportunities to raise greater awareness among our faculty and staff across our institutions. Doing linkages with national organizations like SPARC, of course, or OEN, or CCC OER, or ISKME. These organizations often who have professional development opportunities and other kinds of activities. So you can tie into those things and try to create a lot of buzz, because a lot of the work is really just keeping this on the front burner for people and helping them understand what this is, what it's not, what it is, what's the benefits of it, and why it's worth exploring. I would have to say, at least looking at our experience in Massachusetts, having, I think someone just alluded to this, maybe Jenny, having a statewide coordinator, which is the role I serve in, among things I do, one of the roles I serve in Massachusetts, because it allows me to keep the things going, because everyone who's on that statewide advisory council I talk about have a day job that they do. And it's not doing the OER, leading OER specifically what we do. I mean, some of them have that, some of them are OER librarians, so that is their job. Some are instructional designers, so that's certainly a part of their job. But the work that we're doing in that council is work that, if there wasn't my role to kind of keep things moving, keep pushing, they just would drop off because people have so many competing demands on their time. So I'd say that's important because it allows us to do things both at the institutional level and at the system level. So we can hit them at here, we hit it from here and kind of come together. And oftentimes we do that. Like we'll send communications to the top of the house down and then to the advisory council so they can push it up, because oftentimes, because of those horizontal silos, the stuff doesn't connect in the middle. So unless you do that pincer move. There's regular meetings of our advisory council, constant communications, and even social media. We've been trying till, unfortunately, we lost the person who did that at the DHE, but using social media, Facebook and Twitter, to keep, again, the things that we're doing on the front burner among people, and branding even. One of our members who is a marketing professor suggested, you know, we need to develop a brand. So we actually developed our own logo, which we put on everything we do. So people see that logo and know right away, oh, that's the advisory council folks. Because so often we would send out something to the president, the CAO. They would bring it to their local OER person and say, do you know anything about this? And the person's like, I helped create this. What are you talking about? Of course I know about this. So the branding thing became really important so that folks understand this is coming from the advisory council and we're doing this work. So those are some of the strategies we've used, but I want to hear what other folks are doing because this is how I get to learn and get good ideas and bring them back to my system. So.
Well, that was precisely, Bob, the logic behind state teams. And now, I would say in several of our states, there are OER advisory councils at the SHIO level, or there is something that folks have done on their own and created something. In Michigan, they have their own OER community. They have a website, they have membership, they have charter, the charter and everything. They've done this for themselves. And in the Kansas Board of Regents, they have an OER advisory committee where members from a rep from every public institution in the state is there. And so it looks different in each of our states. In a lot of our states, though, there isn't something like this, not yet. So that is really where the regional compact comes in and says, we're going to at least support the meetings and the conversations and help get you there. And that's one of the really important pieces about the regional compacts collaborating under NCOER, the National Consortium for OER, because we do in states where there just isn't that infrastructure, we support that and we kind of fill that gap. The other thing is we try to wrap this issue. You were talking about how do you help people know the difference between inclusive access and OER and the distinctive benefits of OER. Well, just today, if you take the WCET blog, we have a blog about a paper that we have coming out, and Bob was part of the group that helped us develop this paper, and so is Nicole Allen, where we're looking at kind of bringing some consistency to the reporting of OER. And in this case, the first piece of that we kind of carved out was cost savings research, because first of all, it's all over the map and there are tons of different assumptions and methodologies and ways of doing it. And I think it is hard to brand that, right? It's hard. For lack of a better way of putting it, if it doesn't look, I always say this, it's not only apples and oranges, it's bananas and pineapples and kumquats, and there's everything all over. And you really don't just have this recognition when you see it. Oh, this is an OER cost benefit analysis. This is the ROI. We're at least trying to get it to, maybe they're all apples. They might be different kinds of apples, like a Granny Smith or a Macintosh or whatever. But you know it when you see it. And then we're going to be moving through these other phases where we are kind of branding the benefits. And we make sure in this first part of this 3-part series that we are very specific about when we talk about OER, we mean one that checks all these boxes. And we are distinguishing it from inclusive access that way. And these are documents that we intend for people to use, these recommended practices, as they present information, whether the legislature wants to know how you spent their money on OER, or someone at the SHIO or the system level or the institution, as they continue to see something consistent. And we are recommending that you report out on pieces where OER has a benefit and these other modalities do not. So that's one of the ways we think it's going to take a while, but we do think that's building kind of a deep awareness and understanding that hopefully will, within 5 years, maybe will be really meaningful. And we won't have to have some of these conversations or the confusion won't be as profound.
And I want to tackle this from a couple different perspectives. As a board member of OE Global, there's the global piece of, developing these campaigns. And that's what this whole week is about. OE Open Ed Week is all about, raising awareness and sharing what we're doing and coming together as a community, a global community. And so the work that OE Global is doing in regard to the UN Sustainable Development Goals and open government and so many different pieces, I think is one really big piece that is really more and more critical by the minute, I think, at this point. Then there's the national level, and having been on the board of the Community College Consortium for OER and seeing Judith Sebesta here, who is the current president of CCC OER, there's the campaign of being able to bring this community together through listserv, as well as providing all sorts of webinars and different information that are archived that can be reused, which is all in the nature of openness, and featuring the great work that so many institutions are doing. And so there's that piece at the national level. And then when I think about it at my level, the institutional level that I get to work with every day, there's the piece of what we do is we do a lot of awareness and gratitude campaigns. And so during Open Ed Week, generally we do a big awareness campaign. We have a big social media blitz going on right now. It's also priority registration. So we want students to know about OER, how to search for OER through our Finder, letting them know about that. When faculty were more on campus, we do usually annual thank you campaigns where we reach out to the students and let them know that their faculty has chosen to use OER, and they fill out a form which generates certificates that the students share what OER means, being able to use OER means to them. And we wallpaper the faculty's office doors. And then that creates like this competition where one faculty member will be like, how do I get my students to like share what they're doing? And so we get that. That's another way that we're able to campaign. And so, and then at the higher levels within the institution, it's presentations to the board, presentations to the executive sponsors at our district, and really making them aware. The board members love that we're doing OER. This is something that they can share with their voters and constituents, and a way that they're really helping the students at the community colleges. And so all these are ways that we've been campaigning in our OER. And I wanted to kind of just provide that different context of the global, national, and institutional, since I was able to.
I love the high level kind of approach to this. And then also you called it a gratitude campaign or something like that, Lisa?
Yes, gratitude or thank you campaign, where we, just letting the students be able to thank their faculty for what they've done. And I can't take full credit for that. Nicole Finkbeiner, who used to be with OpenStax, and I were having a conversation. She said, wouldn't it be cool if we did a thank you campaign for faculty? And I was like, yes. And I jumped on it.
I love that. Because I think, that's why these conversations are so helpful, because it really is at all of those levels. It's not like there's a hierarchy necessarily where one is more important. They really do kind of join together. I love that direct appreciation of faculty, because this is a grassroots movement. It is really crucial to thank the people that put their blood, sweat, and tears into creating openness, because it doesn't just like burst forth. There's a lot of effort that goes into it. I love all of this. It's been fabulous. So I do want to be conscious of time. We only have about 5 minutes left on the clock. I think we can squeeze in this last question, mostly because I'm very curious to hear what you guys have to say about it. So just very briefly, our last question here is, what campus personnel should be involved in the OER process that currently are not? And we can open it up a little bit. It doesn't have to be just campus specific, because I know you guys do a lot of work at the state level as well, but what are some personnel that would benefit us all from bringing them into the conversation?
I can start it at the campus level. There were two areas that we missed when we were pulling together our steering team, and really wanted to have it be really, our intent was to break down the silos and have really great representation. And the two areas that we were missing was student affairs and our faculty senate, which in other states would equate to a faculty union. And so those are two areas that we were missing that we brought on.
Yeah, I would concur with the student piece. Well, kinda. I mean, because our OER movement in Massachusetts, not to take anything from our great librarians who have absolutely been the leadership on this issue, going back to Marilyn Billings in 2014, and others across the state. But the students, certainly the student leadership, the Student Advisory Council have certainly been great influences for the Board of Higher Education. And there are actually students who sit on the Board of Higher Education who also tied in with our OER stuff. So whenever we bring OER stuff to the board, they're right there to push why this is important. But on the campuses themselves, they had not been engaged as much as they should have been. And that's one of the reasons we started those OER student ambassadors, so that they could both serve on those OER committees, but also could be tapped to be part of, when you're doing a conference on a session on a workshop on OER, to make sure you have a student voice in there, because they are the most compelling voice on this issue for people. I've seen faculty who've been stone cold against it, and they hear the kind of trade-offs that students are making to be able to afford to buy a textbook. And when they realize, because they don't know, which is amazing, but they don't know that students may be foregoing meals, maybe foregoing, pay their car, or putting gas in their car, or, they just have no idea the trade-offs the students may be making to be able to buy those books. And once they realize, it's like, oh my gosh, we should do something about that. So I think that's probably the area, because our librarians, instructional designers always been involved, and faculty were growing in their involvement. But I would say that's probably the area, I think, on the campus. For my job at the system level, the group is the legislators. Those are the people I need to get to, because in order to increase the budget that's going allocated to open educational resources, we got to get more support among the legislatures, which we've been working on. Well, we were working on it pretty ardently up to COVID, and then COVID we got, COVIDed it. So that kind of fell on the back burner, but we got to try to get it back on the front burner again, because we need more funding being allocated specifically to this purpose in order to do some of the things that we want to do.
Well, I second all of the folks that you guys have mentioned. And then again, coming from that broadest kind of regional perspective and seeing it as a large ecosystem, obviously administrators, I keep banging that drum. I just think it's a huge win if they understand and can get behind it. And again, students, like the Student Senate in particular, I'll just say that the board, the OER steering committee on the Kansas Board of Regents was actually a proposal from the Student Senate. And so it's amazing. Boards really love to hear from students. And if they can come with a united voice and say, this is a priority for us, it's very impactful. I actually thank the financial aid office, because they're always talking to students about ways to do things. And, one of your packages, one of your offers is 50%. We've got degree program, we've got Z degrees, we've got all these things. This is something to consider about the ultimate cost of an education at our institution. I also think admissions, marketing, enrollment management. Again, it's not just about saving money. It's that this is forward thinking. This is a philosophy of how we create and own and continue to develop knowledge. And it is an important thing to say, again, not just about the cost of your education, but the quality of it. Obviously, as you were saying, legislators, definitely, SHEOs, those state higher education executive offices, they're very good at helping you get the word out. I think you got to bring in your K-12 community, because again, just like with anything, if you start it early and those kids come up through the system, understanding how to find OER and expecting that, they'll be the kids on the young people on the Student Senate who are demanding these things and advocating more effectively. And one of the ways also to access the K-12 community and really think about this connection is the concurrent enrollment dual credit community. I work a lot with them, and we work on OER as part of that. And again, it gets a really great set of collaborations and conversations going about, especially when you've got the K-12 people who are used to aligning everything to a student outcome. And they suddenly are working with someone in tertiary education who maybe hasn't always thought about education that way. That is a huge eye opener if that faculty member is open to it. And again, so then the information is flowing in a different direction than it has, and the expertise, and it helps. So I know that's a little bit broader, but I'm finding that these are all these little pieces that we can set in motion and hope to see them pay off in time.
Really, really great stuff, you guys. Thank you so much. I do want to acknowledge that we're just a touch over, but I'm personally, I can't speak for everyone attending, but I thought it was great information and absolutely worth it. So I just want to acknowledge everyone's time, say we are at time, but I do also want to take a moment and thank our panelists. It was not so long ago that I was a student myself, I am deeply touched by the work you all are doing. It kind of mentioned earlier, OER isn't just spring forth, right? There's blood, sweat, and tears behind it. And I am so appreciative that you agreed to be here today. You agreed to share your knowledge, and that you're doing this work. It really does impact students. It changes their lives. And I appreciate you all so, so very much. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting us.
Of course.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks
you all
all
for coming.
Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you guys later.